Hello, Future Proof. Welcome to the 1:30 hour, where we're going to talk all things digital onboarding and really have a great discussion. My name is Tim Welsh, president of Nexus Strategy. It's a consulting firm I started about 19 years ago, and we help companies go to market in the RA space. And it's my privilege and honor to be up here to introduce a dynamic panel, two experts in this space who know everything there is to know about our topic. So let's start with you, Rob. A couple words about you, yourself, your company.
Thanks. Rob Nance. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dispatch. We're the first data orchestration company in the wealth space. What that means is we help firms onboard data, deliver it to where they need to go, and keep it in sync over time.
Wonderful. Natasha.
Great to meet everyone. I'm Natasha Kingham. I'm head of technology for Alti Global. We're a $74 billion MFO, offices in the US and all around the world as well. So my responsibility is really ensuring that we have the strategy and the delivery of all of the applications and data that we need for our wealth management teams globally. So excited to have the conversation.
So let's make it easy. How long should it take to open an account? Why don't you take us on without Natasha, and maybe you can query the audience on how long it takes them.
Yeah, maybe let's turn to everyone here. I mean, if you're working at a wealth management firm, maybe we can do a little show of hands. So how many people are onboarding clients in weeks? One person, weeks. How many people in two people? Good. How many people in days? One person. Two people. Well, that's pretty good. And how many people in minutes? One person raised their hand. Okay, so I wasn't 100% right that there wouldn't be anyone. But yeah, I mean, I think for the wealth management industry, we've been pretty much behind the curve. I think in terms of bringing on clients at speed, but also doing that with that level of high touch that's required. Looking at kind of the e-commerce model and seeing some things that we could learn from that. Really, we're well behind the curve of some of these providers. So I think if anyone is onboarding clients in minutes, I think that's a pretty major achievement.
Rob, what do you think about that? Is that true?
I mean, I think when you look at onboarding and the complexity of data today and where things have gone and how technology has or hasn't kept up with advisors, that oftentimes I do think it takes weeks for firms to onboard.
And what are those pain points? What's sort of getting in the way? What are the barriers? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think when we think about onboarding, I don't think you can really look at it in a silo anymore. Just like if you buy financial planning software, you're not buying a piece of software just to do pre-retirement planning and want to do post-retirement planning. You look at that as one thing, understanding that entire life cycle. And when you think about onboarding, it's part of a client's data life cycle management. And that isn't just something that should be looked at in a vacuum. You should think about it as, I'm using this to get the data where I need, the tools that I need to operate my business. And then I need that data to live throughout those solutions over time. And so when you think about onboarding, it's a task of larger data lifecycle management. And as you think about things you're going to do in the future with AI, having data in one place, having data talking to each other is going to be a really important piece of that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we like to think of that kind of one entry point into all of our workflows. And I think turning a little bit more to the workflow side of it, I think the pain points that we see are really around, one, asking clients for the same information multiple times, asking them for their passport, for KYC, but then for compliance, and then for operations. Obviously, that breaks trust immediately because they think you're not organized, you don't have all of your ducks in a row. I think another major pain point that we have is the point that I mentioned around speed and transparency around the process. So, I mean, again, turning to those e-commerce models. I mean, if you look at like an Amazon parcel that you buy, you know where that parcel is at every kind of stage of the journey, but yet you're transferring hundreds of $millions to a wealth manager and you have no idea when you're actually going to be onboarded. So I think the transparency point is something that we see a lot with our clients.
And is that happening now? I mean, can we actually see, I love that example of Amazon tells me it left the package, the warehouse, it's at this spot, and then it's going to be on my door in an hour. I mean, that's amazing. Can we get there? Rob, what do you think?
Well, I think certainly today, as you look at onboarding and define it by, I've got to capture this client data that I may need to collect as a business task for myself. Some of that data can be used if I'm opening accounts for those clients. Some of that data can be used in maybe financial planning that I'm using, and it also needs to live in another system that I have. And so I think when we look at onboarding, yes, maybe we can get data into one place, but one of the challenges I think that we see a lot of firms face is the ability to track that data through all the systems that they're using to get that into its initial place, I should say, right, which would be the piece of software that they need.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm an optimist. I think we can get there at some point. I mean, like you said, around having your data not living in silos, like we should be able to track those breakpoints. We should be able to track KPIs on the data and the progress as clients are coming into our infrastructure. I think I actually did a little bit of testing myself to see how long it would take for me to set up a Revolut account as I was doing some prep for this panel, and that was another an amazing process. And I was able to set up and be fully verified in 2 or 3 minutes, including scanning my passport, taking the biometric photo. So I don't know that we'll necessarily get there with wealth management, but I mean we've got a long way to go.
So what you're saying is the custodian's fault, right? They're the ones who all have different data standards. Is that the issue? Different data standards or approaches?
Well, I think when you look at wide variety of custodians, a wide variety of technology companies you work with, certainly they all have different data standards. And the way that they consume data, the way that they send data, it's all formatted differently. It's like trying to get someone that only speaks French to understand somebody that only speaks German. And the inability to translate, I think, is where a lot of firms run into problems, because trying to build point-to-point integrations with any of those systems is tough. And then I think the toughest part from the custodian front is, what if that custodian has a paper-based account opening process, where you're doing direct business and you have a paper-based process? How can you take something that is digital, right, if you're using a digital process, and be able to marry up with that very manual paper process?
So do we always need signatures? Or is there any way we can get away from the DocuSign and the back and forth? What do you think?
I mean, maybe you have to ask the U.S. government for that. I don't know. I don't think we necessarily can get away from signatures. I mean, we obviously have to have some kind of verification of identity and signature on contracts, but I think we can certainly make the process a lot more smooth. I mean, I think digital signature was a major paradigm shift for onboarding that happened a while ago, and I think now with AI, that's obviously going to be another huge paradigm shift for onboarding. But I think I don't think we'll get to a point where we don't need to have clients to sign, but we do need to make the process a lot more streamlined.
And I think, to jump in there, I think what a lot of firms should be thinking about is, how do you abstract the experience away from the underlying process? So something may be paper-based, but can you deliver a digital experience that feels that it isn't paper-based? And so there's a way to abstract those processes, which I think is really important, while hopefully a lot of firms catch up to a digital process. I mean, I can go open a Robinhood account in 2 minutes. And so the technology's there, and it exists. And so I think a lot of it is catch-up that has to be played.
Yeah, so Natasha, how do you think about this? If I'm a marketer, I'm building my brand, and this is the first time somebody's going to interact with me, what should I be thinking about?
In terms of onboarding?
Yeah, the whole branding issue of what the company's all about, and your first experience is a big pile of papers, and how should we think about that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think this is the first interaction that you have with the broader organization, so not the kind of slick relationship manager or the BD professional. This is your actual experience with the company, and it really kind of, if the onboarding process is bad, it obviously it damages the brand, it erodes trust right from the beginning, and you're always kind of working to win that back again. So I think it's extremely important for us to get it right.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it. My 2 favorite letters in the alphabet are A and I. So let's go there. What about the AI, Natasha? You mentioned it, and how can that maybe transition this or transform it? And then, Rob, I'd love your thoughts on a broader approach to maybe data management around that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're a global wealth management firm. We have a huge amount of unstructured data, a lot of these forms and PDF documents, et cetera. So for us, a major obvious use case of AI is document processing. I can see some people from Arch that we work with in the audience. They do an amazing job with all of the private equity stuff, but we also have other types of whole reams of unstructured data, whether it's onboarding forms or other types of documentation. So being able to process any kind of document and kind of pull all that data out into your kind of data warehouse, where it can then be leveraged and utilized in other processes is I think a big, again, paradigm shift that we can achieve using AI.
And from the data management point of view, and how to get your arms around all that data so the AI can lay on top of it. What should we be doing?
Yeah, I think when you think about AI, like where it is today versus where it's going in 6 months, 5 years, 10 years. Today there's a lot of applications out there, really great at AI note takers, really, really helpful. But really to leverage this in the future, it's going to have command over your data. How do I understand how my data that lives in every system? I mean, I'm sure there's people out here in the audience, you maybe have different data in different systems. And the client data is not perfect across those systems. So what I'd be thinking about is how do I think about deconflicting that data? Because AI is not going to be powerful if you have Joe Smith in one system and Joseph Smith in another, and it doesn't know those are the same person. So how do we think about taking that data today, deconflicting it, and focusing on that? Because I think in the time frame of a year or so, the ability to build AI on top of that, so that when you're on a Zoom call or a Teams call, whatever it may be, and the client says, oh yeah, what year was I retiring again? That should be pulled immediately onto your screen and pop up and say, oh, the financial plan said that it was in 2004. But you can't do that if you don't have clean, normalized data across all of those systems.
So do I need a data lake house, data warehouse, or a data lake? Which one do I need?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the key is less, do I need data to sit in one place, and do I have to pull everything one place, but how is data normalized across all of my systems, and do I have a way to connect all of my systems to a central hub? And that hub doesn't have to be a data lake necessarily. And in fact, one of the challenges I think that some firms face with a data lake is that data still may not be the same in every system that you have. And you may be pushing data one direction versus having it live bidirectionally across all the systems you have. So I don't think it means to leverage this, I have to go and invest in a data lake. But it certainly means I need to be able to deconflict data across all the systems I have, and then make sure I can try to keep that in sync over time.
What are your thoughts, Natasha?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's a way within kind of the wealth tech space to get away when you're at scale to get away with not having some kind of modern data architecture. I mean, we have a data warehouse, and then like our integration layer as well that enables us to integrate disconnected, disparate systems, data sources, clean all the data, govern the data. I don't think you can really achieve these like very lofty ambitions that we have of days long or minutes long onboarding without that kind of modern data architecture. Otherwise, it's just too much, multiple entry points for the same data, too much manual work.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, we're in a regulated industry, so there's lots of hoops that we have to jump through. If you're thinking about streamlining this process, what are those trade-offs? How do you make sure you get all the I's dotted, T's crossed, but at the same time make it seamless, fingertip? Or can we do that? Rob, what do you think?
So I think when you're thinking about staying compliant and onboarding, the best thing you can do is understand the data you have about your client, understand where that data lives, and understand when I'm going to perform an action with that data, like open an account. Understand, do I have 90% of the data for that? Do I have 60%? How can I request that from the client? Is what's really important. And then to the extent you can have an audit log of who's making data changes, that goes a long way. And I think that's going to be bigger and bigger as we have more AI agents operating on top of the data that advisors use in their business.
What do you think, Natasha?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it also from the workflow perspective. Again, it's the same kind of points that we've been saying. We should be asking for this information from clients once it enters the system, and then we use it in all of the different kind of workflows that we need to do, whether it's KYC, compliance, AML checks, etc. I think that's super important. I think as soon as compliance becomes a pain, again, clients get frustrated. It erodes trust with the organization. So we're like you say, highly regulated. We have to think about these things, but kind of a KYC once, use many approach, I think is the way forward.
Go ahead.
If I can jump in, I think in a way having better data management practices is what helps with compliance, right? We went from when I started as an advisor a million years ago having everything in a filing cabinet, right, where you have digging through data trying to find it, to having it live multiple places with a digital representation of that, to now like you can have a source of truth on that data and know what it is definitively. So when you go do an annual review of a client, you can say, look, here's all the data we have about you. Is that correct? They can confirm that and say yes. And then once that's done, what's magical about that is what the true data is, exactly where it's living, and how that affects every system you interact with.
So we have this thing called a form. I understand that's prevalent everywhere we go. Can we get rid of the form? Can it just be a place to just type in some data and then that can be leveraged across multiple accounts, multiple systems. Is that available today, or is it coming? Natasha, we're starting. Rob, I'd love your thoughts.
I think it's definitely available today. I mean, we see it in other industries, and to Rob's point around the data management side of things, is once you know all the data points that you need to collect, you then just need a nice UI on the top of it to kind of step people through the process, make sure it's intuitive. And if you're stepping people through the process, that's when you can start to build in some of those things that I talked about earlier, like trackers and estimates of timing, and sort of see all of the different sort of decision points or breakpoints in that process in a more intuitive format.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately a form is just a way to structure data. And it's a way to structure data so historically someone could look at that and know where the name field is and know where they could then input that into their computer manually. That's where a form came from. And so today, if we can digitally structure the data in the same way, you don't really need a form, right? A form is just, you could produce one as a digital representation of what you've collected. But ultimately, like we really see things going is totally digital. I can collect the data that's needed for a particular account type, and then that's digitally sent to the custodian, and that account gets opened in real time. And there are no forms in the middle because you don't really need them as data becomes more structured, as you can own those data points, and you really have the ability to leverage that again and again, as Natasha was talking about.
I mean, I think one thing that we have to be careful of not doing is just assuming that by putting a PDF form online that we've created a digital process. I think like that's still, clients will not be impressed by that. It's really moving towards more of that kind of intelligent, intuitive UI kind of approach that we see with fintechs and e-commerce, that I think is an actually true digital process.
Do we need middleware here to do all this management, or what's sort of the use case?
I mean, I think from a middleware perspective, the ability to do the translation is really important. You think of a lot of companies that we all work with in this space all have APIs, but you're generally going to hear some flavor of this. If I use Salesforce and Adapar, I've got to structure my households a certain way in Salesforce because that's the only way that they flow correctly. And that's just the fact there's different data models working together. And so if you can build a middleware translation layer, and you can structure data however you want in every system and have that Rosetta Stone that does the translation in the middle, that's really powerful. And then the ability to leverage that when onboarding is the secret sauce. If you go and have prospect meetings and you have data already about that client, you don't want to ask them again if you already have it. And so if you know you're opening certain account types, if you know you're taking certain actions and you can say, I've got 90% of this data, I just need these 10 data points from clients, that becomes really powerful when you think about collecting data, making it dynamic, reusing those data points over and over.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way around having an integration layer to do this at scale. I mean, I think trends in the wealth space generally, people are focusing on applications, and then how do you kind of tie them all together with that middleware, that integration layer, the translation layer, as you mentioned, Rob. I mean, actually, I read a really great case study, which I can share with anyone if they want to after this, but about RBC Capital Markets, who did a huge project to really kind of revolutionize all of their digital onboarding by putting in place, using MuleSoft and Salesforce, but taking 26 disparate systems and tying it into all into one truly digital onboarding process. And they took the time to onboard a client from weeks down to, I think it was 24 minutes. So there's the minutes again. So I think that they would not have been able to achieve that without middleware and a modern data architecture.
Can we get rid of the paper, or are we stuck with it? Where are we in this life cycle of paper in this process?
I mean, I think paper is driven a lot by the custodians or the direct business that you have to use. Certainly as an advisor, I think there's no reason to have paper anymore, right? So if you have an intake questionnaire, digitizing that is table stakes, I think, at this point. As far as getting rid of forms, I think there's ways to get rid of you as the advisor interacting with those forms, so that you digitize those, data is injected onto those forms. You need to understand the data that's required for them, but I don't think you need to spend time filling those out anymore. And I think we see the industry with our interactions with the custodians moving away from a form-based process. I think if you're on the broker-dealer side, you're talking about direct business. I think that's a whole kind of another can of worms that exists that may take a lot longer. But from a custodial standpoint, I think you see the major custodians now putting in an effort to really create true API-based account opening processes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for, the way I think about it, it's kind of an operating model question for the advisor themselves. Like, do you want to be interacting with custodian banks that can't provide any kind of digital process, that are still asking you to sign paper forms, which we all know are not secure? I think that it's not a decision I could make for the firm, but I think it is a consideration where you want to be working with firms that have the same kind of approach and strategy towards digitization and digital transformation as we do.
And I'll just throw this out there because I know it's on everyone's mind. Cybersecurity is part of this process. What sort of checks or balances do you have to have in this to make sure that the bad guys don't get in?
Sure. I mean, I think there are plenty of enterprise grade encryption techniques that firms use. Things to look for, firms you work with. What is their compliance regime? Are they SOC 2, Type 2 compliant? Do they take the time to have data policies that are robust around what they're doing? And so I think thinking about things like that's important, and even going a level deeper. Like, if these firms are interacting with your personal data, where are the engineers that are working on this data? Are they based in the U.S.? Are they based overseas? Like, really digging in and understanding that, I think, is going to be really important as more data lives, on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are really great points, and I think a lot of the providers that we work with, they're very, they're blue chip providers, they're blue chip names, so you would expect them to have all of the kind of security certifications that we would expect, all the audits, etc. I think there's also some things that we can do internally. I mean, we own the data, like we have our own kind of infrastructure. It all lives within our cloud, so I think that's important for us as a security concern. I mean, I think just sort of thinking to some more of the applications of some of these, some of the new technology that's coming out, I think something that I would love to dig into, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Rob, is kind of biometric verification. Like, if you can open your phone with your face, why can't you open a bank account or open a custodian account, or open an account with your wealth manager? So I think that could potentially be a bigger trend coming, particularly as there's younger people, wealth transfer happening over the next couple of decades. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that verification on the client end, right, is probably there or coming. I think it's how can you verify and open accounts or perform other actions with more legacy, banks or institutions.
Okay, so imagine, if you will, the year 2030, we're at future proof again. We're probably in Portugal or somewhere even more exotic than this. Do we have the same panel, or will we solve it by then?
I think if we look at AI and where it's going and the trend and the acceleration it has, I think we'll be in a much different place if that trend continues, and we keep moving on that pace. I think the thing I'm most interested about when it comes to that is what is going to happen with all the data that is going into AI models, and like, is that being shared everywhere? Does that live on-prem or on a cloud of that institution? And that's something that certainly could slow down innovation.
What do you think, Natasha?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, if we haven't solved it by then, that's kind of on us as the technologists at these firms. I mean, I think with all of the advancements that are happening at the moment, that there really isn't an excuse to not have made considerable progress on this within 5 years' time when we're in Lisbon. So yeah, I mean, I think it's on us to execute now. And I think when you talk to when I speak to my compatriots, my colleagues like that do similar roles, that have similar roles to me, a lot of people are saying, oh, we've got all these great use cases and AI is going to change everything. But when you actually dig in and say, well, how much have you actually done? A lot of people are still relatively early doors. So I think it's still early stages. There aren't a huge amount of like the large sort of clunkier wealth managers that are actually executing on this technology at the moment.
Love it. So we have 1 minute left. So 30 seconds each. Final takeaways, final thoughts. What should we all know?
I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities to leverage new technology in businesses. In your business in particular, if you're a wealth manager, I think the big key is going to be understanding your data and unifying your data so you can actually take advantage of the new technology trends.
I couldn't agree more. I think for me, it's that point around integrability and ensuring that you have one source of truth, one entry point for the client, so the client experience is intuitive. But it still feels kind of high touch, and there is also the speed element of it as well. I think the point around the brand impact that you made earlier, Tim, is pertinent. If we get this wrong, it erodes the trust, it erodes the value of the brand from the get go. So it should be a huge focus for all of us.
Awesome. Well, 18 seconds left. Let's have an 18-second round of applause for our awesome panelists.